Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon to the folks on the East Coast. I am Todd Obert, President and CEO of Productive Corporation, and joined here today with Jaron Shaw of Tenable Network Security, the proud owners of the product that we fondly call Nessus, the Nessus scanner. Today we're talking about the power of Nessus and the ease of use in its cloud product. So if you have been to our events in the past, you know how we roll. We like to get right into the technology and minimize the fluff for others. We have 30 minutes today, so buckle up. We are going to go through and meet Productive in 1 minute. Then we'll find out a little bit of who is Tenable, and why you need vulnerability scanning, and then take a look at Nessus Cloud, right? It's the Nessus product that scans from the cloud. Pretty cool features, pretty interesting product. Utilize that chat feature throughout, and we will get to the Q&A. But for now, let's get rolling, and let's find out who is Productive Corporation. Well, who is Productive? Well, thank you so much for asking. I'm really glad you did. Productive is a security and storage software expert for mid-sized companies. We have a dedicated staff that can help you with licensing implementation questions, as well as product expertise, so that you don't have to navigate the World Wide Web on your own. We also implement, test, and optimize the products that we sell. We do everything from VA security tests, pen tests. We do endpoint health check, config assistance, UTM optimization. We also produce third-party content for the mid-market. We have a knowledge series, so you can learn about things like CryptoLocker and Backdoor Dropper. You can find that at productivecorp.com/content. You can also find it on our YouTube channel. The bottom line is we have the resources to help you. Whether it's implementation, assessment, licensing, optimization services, or knowledge, help at productivecorp.com, 800-726-4099. We are here to help. And one of the ways that we do that is by talking about fantastic offerings in the mid-market. Today we're talking about Tenable Network Security's Nessus Cloud product. The man with the plan who is going to tell us about Nessus Cloud is Jaron Shaw from Tenable. One of their corporate engineers. He has been rocking the Tenable hat here for some time, and really am very excited about what he's going to share with you today. So let's give a warm virtual round of applause all the way from Baltimore, Maryland, Jaron Shaw. Jaron?
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, everyone at Productive. So I'm going to take us through Nessus Cloud today, but before I do that, I want to just introduce myself. I want to introduce the Tenable product line so you'll know where Nessus Cloud fits in. Again, my name is Jaron. I've been a sales engineer here at Tenable for quite some time. I've been with Tenable actually for over 4 years now. And I go through the products on a daily basis, so today's no different, and that's what I'm going to take us through. If you're familiar with Tenable, if you're familiar with our product at all, you'll probably have heard of Nessus by now. Nessus is our vulnerability assessment tool. So Nessus is what we use for vulnerability scan. It is probably our most well-known product. And Nessus is used most frequently for ad hoc scanning. It's very good at what it does. It runs through a pretty comprehensive list of checks. It gathers as much information about the systems on your network as it can. It is what we call an active scanner. So it interacts with its targets in some way to gather as much information as possible. Nessus Cloud is really no different. Nessus Manager and Nessus Cloud, if you go on our website, you'll see both of those products positioned in very similar fashion. They're very similar products. The biggest difference is going to be that Nessus Manager is going to be an on-prem solution, and Nessus Cloud is going to be a cloud-hosted solution. And personally, I tend to lean towards Nessus Cloud. It's easier to manage, and there's some benefits to using the cloud, which I'll go over. And that's what we're going to look at today. So it is still a Nessus scanner, but there are some differences in the deployment options, and I want to make those clear. It would also behoove us to go through Security Center very quickly, just so that you're aware that Tenable offers some other products as well. Security Center is our vulnerability analytics platform. So when you start to scale your vulnerability management project up and you start to run many scans, perhaps over a distributed environment, or if you want to run scans very frequently, or you simply just want better analytics of the vulnerabilities that you're seeing, being able to look back in time and say, well, 6 months ago we were in this place and this is how we've improved over the last 6 months. Security Center is the platform that handles that. We also have Security Center Continuous View, which is a bit outside of today's discussion, but it is a continuous monitoring product. It's a very interesting product. We leverage not just Nessus in that product, but we have a passive network monitor that is looking at your network traffic. It is a passive vulnerability scanner, so it's still looking for vulnerabilities, but it does so in a fundamentally different way than Nessus. So Nessus is an active scanner. The passive vulnerability scanner doesn't actually reach out to the targets. It instead watches the network communication going to and from a target to gather vulnerabilities. And we also pull logs into that product as well, so that not only can you identify a vulnerable host, but you can look at how that host is behaving, so that you can see if it's changed in any way. So we should have a solution for your need. Regardless of what it is, we can scale all the way up from ad hoc scanning all the way to continuous network monitoring. But like I said, today we are here to look at Nessus Cloud. So Nessus Cloud, it is Nessus. It's just been developed over the last decade plus. Going back in the day, we had originally Nessus had 50 plugins. Scale that to today, we've got closer to 75,000 plugins. So a plugin is a small script. It's basically what Nessus uses to check for either a single vulnerability or a group of closely related vulnerabilities. Nessus originally was open source, and we developed that product quite substantially. So moving on to today, Nessus is quite different from what you would have seen here if you had been using Tenable for the last 10 years, 15 years. So now Nessus is the most widely deployed vulnerability scanner on the market. It does vulnerability scanning. It will check for misconfigurations and compliance as well. A lot of people don't realize that Nessus can do that. So in addition to the standard vulnerability check that Nessus runs, we can also check to make sure that your systems are configured in accordance with specific guidelines, standards, benchmarks. PCI is an example. HIPAA, the CIS benchmarks are another great example. We can also do malware detection. Lots of interesting stuff comes back when you run a Nessus scan against a target. Before we jump into the interface, I just want to point out how the Nessus Cloud platform itself is deployed. So I'm going to go over just a few of the deployment options that you have. I want to make it very clear that Nessus Cloud can scan your external IPs, but it can also run internal vulnerability scans. One of the nice features about Nessus Cloud is the fact that you can link up internal scanners and still manage them from your cloud-based platform. That allows you to scan your entire environment, very comprehensive solution. Internal, external scans can all be accomplished with Nessus Cloud. In addition, this year we released Nessus Agents. So Nessus Agents were a solution to a unique situation. A couple of different use cases for Nessus Agents. Essentially, they still perform vulnerability scans just like a traditional network-based scan. But in a traditional network-based scan, it is advisable to provide credentials so that Nessus can actually log into a target. If you cannot provide credentials, or if that target is perhaps a remote workstation and is not connected to your corporate network, you may not be able to run a fully authenticated scan, or you may not be able to scan that system at all. Nessus Agents were designed to alleviate that issue. An agent is basically a very small version of Nessus that installs on the host itself, and it reports back with its vulnerabilities. So when you initiate your Nessus scan, the agent says, here are my vulnerabilities, rather than Nessus having to reach out. And that is one of the unique solutions that Nessus Cloud provides, is that your systems don't necessarily have to be configured or connected, rather, to your corporate network. Instead, they can actually just reach out to Nessus Cloud, report back with their vulnerabilities, and it makes it a lot easier to manage a remote workforce, or in the case of credential management, if you don't have credentials, the agents are extremely versatile. Quite a few different platforms we support on those agents. So I'll get into those as well.
Yeah, so Jaron, is that, I'm passing control over you, but so that's right, I get it, right, remote office is on a different subnet or different network, or you have, I mean, would it be also that agent effective for systems that weren't connected to the external world, right, or are there, how?
Potentially. So if you have your agents configured, they should be linking up to Nessus Cloud. If you wanted to keep that all internal, Nessus Manager would be essentially the same platform. The only real difference between Nessus Manager and Nessus Cloud is where your primary interface lives.
Okay.
So the advantage to using Nessus Cloud is you get the external scans. If you wanted internal scans, you could still use an internal scanner. You wouldn't necessarily have to have the scan targets be connected to the internet. The secondary Nessus scanners, the ones that live locally inside your environment, they connect back to Nessus Cloud over port 443, and that's an outbound connection. So usually you don't have to open up firewall rules to get the solution in place. It's pretty easy to deploy.
So if you're using Nessus Professional, can you use Nessus Agent for remote workstations?
Excellent question. No, you cannot. That is unique. The agents are for Nessus Manager and Nessus Cloud, and that's one of the big differentiators.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you for that question. So now you have it. You have it. Whenever you want to take control, you just show us out. Another question: How does Nessus Cloud work with workstations that have Semantic Cloud installed? Is there any compatibility issues?
There shouldn't be. You can configure your system specifically to allow your scans. Agents might be a good way to go through and perform those scans, and that might be okay. You can also configure your Symantec product to allow the Nessus scan. So there are ways to configure it. It should be okay. We understand that you're not using Tenable's product in a vacuum, so we like to play nicely with other products.
Thank you. I say on behalf of all of our customers. All right, so here we are. We're looking at your screen. What are you showing me?
Okay, so this is Nessus Cloud. It's actually a pretty simple interface. It's designed to be easy to use. What I'm going to do is take us through some of the organizational stuff first. So we'll go through administration. I want to point out some of the features that we have for user roles and access, and then we'll set up a scan. We'll see what that looks like, and I'll show some scan results as well. Hopefully we'll have some time for questions also. So I'm keeping my eye on the clock. All right, so just some administrative stuff. I want to just point out that if you do purchase Nessus Cloud, you can set up user accounts to all access the same license. What I've got is various different accounts all set up to the same Nessus Cloud license, but I have them organized into user groups, so I can adjust who gets to do what. Maybe I don't want all of my users syncing up Nessus agents or adding secondary scanners. Perhaps I don't want them running scans. Maybe I want to control that, but I still want them to see the vulnerability data. So you can adjust all of that in Nessus Cloud. It's nice to be able to have that, and we also have a group sharing model so that if you create a scan, you might be able to share out perhaps external vulnerability scans with one team and then maybe internal vulnerability scans with a different team. And so you can adjust who gets to see what, and it's pretty flexible in that regard. The other thing is the way the agents are organized in the secondary scanners. So you can see I'm licensed for multiple scanners, and I'm also licensed for many agents. And you can link all of those up. The agents are assigned to groups, and that's what makes them very easy to scan. So you can see I have a lab that I've got set up. I have some workstations in one group, servers in another group. And the reason it's nice to set it up this way is you can adjust which systems get scanned. Maybe you want to scan your workstations during the day when you know they'll be online, and you want to scan your servers off hours. You could do that. It doesn't really matter, but it's nice to have the flexibility to organize everything. Okay, so the administrative stuff all out of the way. What I'm going to do is walk through setting up a Nessus scan policy. And this is going to be very similar to the traditional Nessus scanner Will also be very much the same in Security Center, so we try to keep this pretty easy. A scan policy is essentially telling our scanners or our agents which checks we want to run, which vulnerability checks we want to run. So when you go to add a new policy, you can choose from a bunch of different templates. I'm actually going to walk through an advanced scan, but notice that you can do things like host discovery scan. We can do just a basic network scan. We can look for single vulnerabilities if that's what we want to do. So we have quite a bit of control over how the scan runs. But typically, I recommend you enable all checks. That's a safe thing to do. It makes scanning easy. The way Tenable organizes these checks is into plugin families. And so this is where the plugins or the vulnerability checks actually reside. We're somewhere around 75,000 checks. I think we've passed that by now, I would imagine. Tenable pushes out new vulnerability checks, new plugins every single day. Sometimes we can push out 100 plugins in a day. It's not uncommon. So we will push out quite a few checks. As new vulnerabilities become public, we write checks so that you can scan for them. And that's what makes vulnerability scanning so important, is that if you run your scans, as soon as the vulnerability is disclosed to the public, you can do something about it before, say, a malware authors malware that exploits that vulnerability. And that's how you keep your environment safe.
Do those CAN scans, right? I mean, any updates that are related to those back on the, you have the different just standard scans, all that gets incorporated real time as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it does. So your scanners automatically get the update, and your new scans will reflect those changes. You do have some control. We've made it so that if you only want to run a few specific checks, that won't change. So you won't have things that you're not aware of automatically enabled unless you want that to happen.
Yep.
So there's quite a bit of flexibility in enabling this. We want to make sure that you can turn off individual checks if you want to. But most of the time, I pretty much just recommend just turn them all on. The reason for that is, go ahead, question?
Well, I was going to say, what do you see most customers in practicality doing? I know what you're recommending, but are you seeing them just basically keep almost everything enabled unless there's a specific thing that they know they don't want to run?
Yeah, most of the time, everyone's just running scans with all plugins enabled. And the reason for that is Nessus knows what it's scanning. So if it hits a Windows target, it's not going to try the Linux checks, even though they're enabled in the policy. It actually runs through them in a logical order. So it tries to gather as much information as it can. Enabling all scans is pretty common. The only time you might want to maybe enable just a couple plugins if you want to do something like, host discovery. You don't really want all the vulnerability scans running. You just want to do like a ping sweep of your network. You could use Nessus for that. But we have policy templates to get you started with that, so you don't usually have to go through and handpick plugins.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the compliance side of things, also something I want to point out, and these run alongside the Nessus vulnerability checks. I mentioned this earlier. Not everyone is aware that we can do this, but if you want to audit devices configuration, even on Windows systems, for example, if you wanted to check settings in the registry, you can audit your systems to make sure that they are configured in accordance with benchmarks or a standard like HIPAA, like I said before, PCI, for example. So you can run these checks alongside your Nessus vulnerability checks. These are a little bit different. This is going to be more like something like checking to make sure a system is configured with a strong password policy being enforced. So not really a traditional vulnerability, but still something we can check for just by the nature of the way a Nessus scan runs. Credentials are going to be managed very similar to the way you run a traditional Nessus scan. If you can provide Nessus credentials, it will log into the target, run an authenticated scan. The example I always like to use is port enumeration. We can do that remotely, but if Nessus logs in, it'll run netstat and pull back open ports. So it's a different method, and if you kind of carry that theme through all of the vulnerability checks it runs, we can see packages that are installed, things that are maybe not necessarily visible to the network. The settings of a scan policy have to do with things like permission, who should see this policy and who gets to use it, and that kind of thing. All right, so when I run my scans, I'm going to add a new scan, very quickly configure this. There's a few things I want to point out. So right here on this page, I can choose templates for a traditional network scan, I can also choose templates for my agent scans as well, and they are also Nessus scan policies, so very similar types of checks. When you go to run your scan, you choose a template, and then you basically configure your scan to run. So if I choose a scanner template, I can choose one of the externally facing scanners, so one of the ones hosted by Tenable, and this is how I would perform scans in my external environment. Alternatively, I could choose a locally placed internal scanner, that's the one you see down here, and run a scan of my internal assets, all done from Nessus Cloud. And then you just define your targets here. You can run this on a schedule if you like, so you can enable your schedule, or you can just set it to manually launch. The agent scans work a little bit differently. When you go to run your scan, instead of setting up a scan that launches right now, you set up a window. You basically open the window for 1 hour. I want all of my agents to check in. Anything that hasn't checked in by the end of that hour, we're going to consider it wasn't scanned. Anything that does check in, it just looks like a regular Nessus scan with traditional vulnerability results. So hopefully now the screen you're seeing makes a little bit more sense. The way I've organized these scans, some of them run on a schedule, some of them are on demand. I have a corporate HQ. This is an internal scan. I have CIS benchmarks, so these are configuration audits that I use. Actually, I run the agents to perform that. And then I have a remote workstation agent scan as well. So I've grouped these logically based on the different types of scans I might need to run. When the scans come back, Nessus Cloud displays a dashboard that gives you high-level trending, showing you, are you doing better or worse than the previous few scans that have run. In this case, the number of vulnerabilities has declined a little bit since the last scan that was run. And then I can actually go through this and actually see which systems were found in the scan, which vulnerabilities were found in the scan. So right now we're seeing the hosts found in the scan grouped by vulnerability. I can change that if I want to group by, say, severity in this case, and kind of run through the list. One of the interesting things I would encourage you to look through is all of the informational plugins that come back as a result of the Nessus scan. You can see quite a few different vulnerabilities, but if I scroll down to the bottom of this list, there is a ton of information collected from the Nessus scanner that people don't really always look at and is extremely useful. OS detection fires as an individual plugin. Information about the scan, trace route from the scanner to the target, different versions of services that are being used or applications that are installed. Lots of useful information comes back from the Nessus scan. So being able to run authenticated scans on a regular basis, be that from a traditional network-based scan or with the Nessus agents, is an extremely important thing to do, even if you're looking just for IT management rather than traditional vulnerability scanning. So worth noting, pay attention to the output of your Nessus scans. A lot of good stuff in there.
So, Jaron, a couple questions. One, how configurable are the notifications, right? I'm guessing this stuff is, not only do you come to the dashboard and dig in, but you can get some alerting out of the product. And then, two, what kinds of things are people looking for in the info that's helping them better manage their environments?
Great question. So you can have your scan results emailed to you when your scan's complete. So if you wanted to, you can filter those results and have the results come back. I have mine set up to email me every day. I don't log into Nessus Cloud every day because I don't need to. I basically just take a look at the latest vulnerabilities that have been found. I use this to manage my own workstation at home and my wife's workstation. When a new vulnerability comes out, I email her and just let her know that she needs to update iTunes, for example. Very simple stuff. So you can have Nessus Cloud emailing you and letting you know, here are the results of the latest scan. Some of the informational stuff that comes back for like IT management, for example, just simple device detection is hugely useful. If you have an IP on your network and you don't know what it is, you can run. I do this at home also. If I don't recognize something, I run a Nessus scan and see what comes back. And it may or may not have a lot of vulnerabilities, but it almost always has useful info. So it will tell me like the device type or the operating system that's running. And then, perhaps if I've authenticated with that system, it will tell me installed software. Lets me know things like, web servers running on that system. So it gives me a lot of information about what what the device is.
All right, cool.
Let's pull up some of the details of a vulnerability. So this is a critical severity vulnerability. We always link the external references. We try to include as much information as we can, information about the hosts themselves, whether or not this system would be exploitable because of this vulnerability. So are there exploit toolkits out there? Does malware make use of this vulnerability that we know of? So we try to include as much information about the vulnerability itself as possible. We also include remediation. So let's say I need to take a few steps. I have to decide which steps are the most appropriate steps to take. Actions to take in this case: update Adobe Flash, then go through and update Firefox, and you'll knock out, it'll go through. It basically organizes the number of vulnerabilities and lets you know if you apply this one patch, this is the biggest thing you can do to enhance the security posture of your environment.
Cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's basically it. I'm keeping my eye on the time. I'm happy to go through things in more detail. I want to make sure that everybody's questions get answered.
Yeah, totally. So quick question here. Is there a situation where you'd absolutely say, hey, it's got to be the on-prem versus the Nessus Cloud, or tell me a little bit about how that, I mean, it seems to me like Nessus Cloud's good for almost anybody. Is there a case where it's not, or are there some considerations to make that are limited versus the on-prem product?
The Nessus Cloud option is the only one that you can use for, so Tenable is a PCI approved scanning vendor, and if you do need that, then you will have to use Nessus Cloud for that. Okay. The on-prem version, if you're favoring that, most of the time when I see it, it has to do with folks who maybe aren't comfortable with keeping data in the cloud. Typically, in most cases I've seen, it's political, and they have to fill out less paperwork for an on-prem solution than they do for a cloud-based solution.
Yeah, right, because you're moving part of that protected data somewhere else, right? I mean,
right.
Yep.
But it's really the same product. We just host the scanner for you with Nessus Cloud, and if you prefer to host that yourself, then there's nothing wrong with doing that.
Cool. And how long does it take somebody to get up and running on the Nessus Cloud solution?
Well, if you request an evaluation of Nessus Cloud, that can be done from our website. I'm sure your sales teams will follow up after, but you pretty much request the evaluation, and as soon as Tenable approves it, you guys just log in and start using Nessus Cloud. You can run your scans right away. If you want to install a secondary scanner, setup of Nessus takes about 5 minutes. You can run Nessus on Windows, on Mac, a bunch of different flavors of Linux. Tenable has an appliance that you can use, and it's a virtual appliance. We don't charge for that. So you have quite a few different deployment options for deploying a Nessus scanner, and you just link it up to your Nessus Cloud account, and then you can run your scans internally as well.
Yeah, and then convert from trial to live, right? And work with Productive on that. All right. Is the cloud version, is that an annual subscription or month-to-month, or how does that work?
From Tenable side of things, that is an annual subscription. We have different pricing tiers. So it's based on the number of hosts that you need to scan. But I would defer to Productive on the pricing.
Yeah, totally. So even if most of the things that we sell that are even monthly subscriptions, you still buy on an annual basis. So effectively, you should look at it as an annual type commitment. Yeah, and if you have specific, I mean, we need to know what you're talking about looking at, but I would have your account exec get with you offline and talk specific pricing for your environment. Great question. Yeah, and anything you find when you're doing, maybe the last minute or so, when you go and do demos for customers, the couple like wow things that they really appreciate seeing.
The wow factor, yeah, that comes from running your first few vulnerability scans.
Yeah.
Yeah, I highly recommend that you, at the very least, test out Nessus Cloud, run internal scans, and try to either link up Nessus agents or run an authenticated scan. You will be shocked at the number of vulnerabilities found that you were completely unaware of. So you have to use a tool like this. If you're not running vulnerability scans, I guarantee you are vulnerable. And they're probably easy fixes too. They're just things that you can simple update. Small configuration changes that you can make to improve overall your level of exposure to risk. So I highly recommend you at least get a Nessus scan running, and then yeah, you can circle back to productive when you have that wow moment.
Yeah, totally. Well, hey, Jaron, thanks so much. Fantastic presentation today, and thanks to everybody who came to our event. I mean, we know you have a ton of stuff going on during the day. You chose to spend a half an hour with us, and I truly appreciate it. As we mentioned, your account exec will be following up, can help you with any of the trial information you need or additional questions regarding Nessus Cloud or other Tenable products. Thank you once again. I'm Todd Obert from Productive, along with Jaron Schall of Tenable, wishing you a fantastic balance of your day and week, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody.